Morning, everyone, and welcome to the NWR Virtual Healthcare Day for November 2021. My name is Finn Blake, and I'll be your host throughout the day. We have an excellent lineup of biotechnology and medical device companies presenting over the course of the day. You can see the schedule at the link which we'll post in the Q&A panel for all to see. So without further ado, let's jump into our first presentation for the day. Up first this morning is Aventus Medical. Aventus is a Brisbane-based medical device company that has developed a unique treatment platform for obstructive sleep apnea and snoring, a fast-growing market valued at $2.4 billion in the US alone. Aventus has a highly scalable model with low fixed costs and has used the COVID-19 pandemic to develop a growing direct-to-consumer offering for patients. This morning presenting will be John Cox, the President and COO of Aventus Medical. Just one little housekeeping thing before we get started. If anyone in the audience would like to submit a question for the Q&A session at the end of this presentation, please do type it in using the Q&A panel on your screen. Without further ado, I'd love to hand over to John when he's ready.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
We can, go for it.
All right, well, good morning to everyone in Australia from sunny California. My name is John Cox, as he said. I'm President and COO of Aventus Medical. Chris Hart, who many of you might know, is on a well-deserved holiday. So it's my pleasure to be here with you, and I'd like to thank NWR. And it's a pleasure to be virtually able to present to people all over the world. And it's nice to have the opportunity, and I'd like to thank everyone involved for giving me the opportunity to present our value proposition to you. All of the standard disclaimers apply as a public company, and then we'll jump into the presentation. Now, Aventus is both a medical technology company and a dental and medical services organization. This structure, it gives us a really unique opportunity to offer both the best technology and treatment solutions and the best patient journey from initial awareness to successful treatment and referral. Our vision as a company, our focus is to be recognized as the first choice globally for treatment of sleep apnea. And by achieving that vision, we really believe we can bring many thousands of patients across the world into care and also deliver outstanding value to our shareholders. Let's begin with the market. For those of you who don't know what sleep apnea is a chronic, lifelong condition that's characterized by the collapse of the airway during your sleep. For reasons we really don't understand, for some people, their airway closes and collapses repeatedly throughout the night, anywhere from 4 or 5 times an hour to 100 times an hour. When that happens, obviously, it makes you exhausted the next day because you're fighting to breathe. And it makes it really difficult to play and to work and to live your life normally. Also, many times gets you kicked out of the bedroom. But more important than that is the chronic health conditions that it can cause. Untreated sleep apnea can cause a wide range of all-cause mortality increases. Patients with untreated sleep apnea suffer from 3 times the risk of sudden death and 4 times the risk of all-cause mortality. Untreated, it causes a variety of conditions from diabetes to dementia to get much worse. So it's a very serious, very prevalent problem and a real challenge for the medical community. That being said, it represents for Aventus a $12 billion addressable market that's growing at a really rapid rate. In order to understand how Aventus can capture the market, we have to really understand the problems in the current market and why patients aren't getting into care. The primary option today for all patients diagnosed with sleep apnea is CPAP, continuous positive airway pressure. Almost everyone in this audience probably knows someone who's on CPAP therapy or who's tried and failed CPAP therapy. CPAP therapy actually works. It holds the airway open and allows you to breathe normally during the night. The problem is it's very hard to tolerate, extremely uncomfortable, and stigmatizing. No one really wants to wear the CPAP device. No one wants to get up the learning curve on how to use it. And so 50 to 60% of the patients who start CPAP therapy quit, despite the fact that they know they need to be on that therapy to preserve their health. That being said, for every patient that's trying CPAP therapy, there are 5 more patients available who have either assessed the options and said they don't want the therapy at all, or they don't want to get into care at all because of some other reason. The other option that's very commonly employed for patients with sleep apnea are oral appliances. They're usually a backup option for patients who have failed CPAP therapy because the problem with oral appliances, at least before Aventus, was that they were very inconsistent. They would not necessarily give the same response to two different patients and really didn't have the kind of efficacy that was required to take a bite out of market share from CPAP. So patients are really left with an option they don't like or an inconsistent option that physicians really don't want to prescribe. So Aventis's vision for 2024, and would like to share with you today how we believe with the right combination of technology and go-to-market model, we can become the first-line therapy for sleep apnea and unseat CPAP as the current first-line treatment. Now, what you see on this slide is a mess, because the first thing that I talked about was the fact that a lot of patients don't like the existing options. But what they like even worse is the complicated and stigmatizing patient journey getting into care. In order to get into a CPAP, patients have to go through a number of clinical visits, a sleep test, and then complicated referrals between the physician, that's their primary care physician, a sleep doctor, and then an equipment supplier. If the patient wants an oral appliance, it's even harder. The patient usually has to fail CPAP therapy first before being prescribed an oral appliance, because those results are just not inconsistent, and then get referred to a dentist to go through numerous steps to enter oral appliance therapy. As you can see, this is as much of a deterrent to getting into care as it is to the technology itself. So if we really want to talk about how Aventis can seize the opportunity in the sleep apnea market, first, we have to have the best-in-class technology where we can threaten CPAP as a first-line therapy, but then we need to have a disruptive market model where we can bring patients into care, take great care of them, and really change their lives with our treatment. In order to understand how we do that, you first really need to understand the requirements of the physician and the patient in this marketplace. They're pretty simple, really. The physicians really want an effective, predictable treatment. They want a happy patient and good results for those patients. Patients want the exact same thing, as you can imagine, but they also want something that's very easy to use every day, unlike CPAP, right? And they want outstanding service, clinical supervision, and support. On the right, you see in this arrow, something that's really an outstanding accomplishment of Aventis. From the very founding, the company was building upon traditional oral appliance technology to step-by-step become a standard of care, providing CPAP-like efficacy, but with the comfort and the wearability of an oral appliance. And what we can do with that is you can really threaten to unseat CPAP as the first-line therapy. Well, let's see how our data stacks up against those requirements. From the founding, when Chris Hart first launched the very first O2 vent device, he showed a very dramatic step up in effectiveness for the O2 vent or the Optima therapy over traditional oral appliances. Adding the X-Vent accessory, which many of you are familiar with because it's available in Australia and Canada and pending FDA approval in the United States, you see another stepwise function in the improvement of efficacy. But the holy grail in our space, the way to really disrupt this marketplace, is for physicians and patients to think that they can be treated effectively and predictably with oral appliance as a first-line therapy. In order to do that, Aventis has partnered with Flinders University and the CSIRO in a 3-year effort to really analyze the characteristics of patients on oral appliance therapy, their types of sleep apnea, and try to predict using machine learning algorithm how to predict which patients will use what therapy, either the O2 vent alone or O2 vent in combination with the X-Vent, or maybe even a pharmacological agent, in order to get the same results as CPAP, predictable efficacy. Well, we're really happy to say that that paper was just published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine. And it shows really for the first time that a non-CPAP treatment, something that could be adopted by patients, can actually have the same efficacy and CPAP-like predictability without the drawbacks of CPAP. And I think that's a real milestone for Aventis. This was just published last month. You combine that with the fact that patients prefer to use oral appliances by 2 to 1 over CPAP, and they'll wear it more often at night. What you have is an opportunity to really treat sleep apnea, because a CPAP machine may be effective, but if you don't wear it every night, you're really not getting the benefit. What you need is benefit and wearability. Now, let's stop talking about the clinical data for a minute and talk about the evolution and the disruption we've caused by having a very unique market model. If you remember the slide where I talked about how patients had to go through this stigmatizing and complicated journey to go from awareness to treatment through multiple physicians, multiple referrals and visits, and a lot of equipment trial and error, the Oventis really innovated in this marketplace with what was called the lab-in-lab model. It brought both the clinician, the physician, and the dentist under the same roof. And the patient could go to one location instead of multiple sites to get the very same quality of care and make a much more simple journey. Oventis pioneered this lab-in-lab model in the fall of 2019, of course, expanding in the US right at the beginning of the world's largest and most destructive respiratory pandemic. So you can imagine during that time, although we had what I believe is a very disruptive go-to-market model that would be preferred by patients across the world, the volume from these sites dropped precipitously during COVID. And remember, for these models, we're not the ones marketing to patients directly. We're just taking care of patients that the physicians bring into care, either the sleep doctor or the dentist. So we're dependent on their referral volume in the lab-in-lab model. As soon as the pandemic struck, Oventis pivoted to a virtual version of lab-in-lab. This is a real innovation as well, but it solved a really unique problem and created a whole core competence for Oventis that wasn't available before. Working very diligently with the clinicians, we figured out how to create the same precise, high-quality care you'd get from in-person visits in a virtual setting, meaning we could do in telehealth and telemedicine what it would take many of those in-person visits used to do. That core competence in the virtual lab-in-lab gave us a lifeline and gave us an opportunity to transition during COVID and take care of patients. And it also created a really unique opportunity, which we'll explain in a minute. But the lab-in-lab model, really the virtual lab-in-lab model, remains a real innovation in patient care and a core competency for Oventis. What you see here is really an idea of how we take referrals, whether it's lab-in-lab or virtual, or from the dentist, and then we've developed through the virtual process and the retooling from COVID, a branded patient journey, meaning we can take those patients, care for them under the Oventis name, and move them from one site to the other virtually so they get the same quality of care. Those models were really helpful, but what we have seen in the evolution of the sleep apnea market is that patients really wanted to find out more about the care themselves. They're online searching for care and for options. So in the winter and the spring of this year, we launched direct-to-consumer marketing with a very missionary website, trying to reach out and market directly to patients, bringing them into the same journey, and then sending referrals to our clinical partners, the physicians and the dentists. So instead of depending on them for referrals, we became the referral source and really developed our model around direct-to-consumer. I can say with a lot of pride today that 90% of our patient referrals are coming from our direct-to-consumer model marketing as we speak. And I'll explain a little bit more about how that works. For those of you who are familiar with how direct-to-consumer marketing goes, you'll recognize these principles. These are well-recognized principles of direct-to-consumer marketing. We've just got the twist on them with the Oventis special clinical model and the fact that this is an outstanding clinical and therapeutic device. We do digital marketing and awareness with online advertising and social media and search engine optimization and all the things that good consumer product companies do. Then we bring those patients to outstanding web properties where we can take care of their interests, fulfill their needs for information, and nurture that interest and try to get them into our care model. If the patient falls out or drops, we have remarketing to follow that patient at home or onto other websites and engage them who haven't purchased or continued into the funnel and to bring them into care. And the last pillar of our direct-to-consumer customer capture model is to motivate those referrals. The Oventis patients are so happy that they almost always generate one or two referral patients, either friends or family, to also want to go into therapy. I'll give you a snapshot with a lot of data on what our customer capture model looks like, because it's a very exciting development for Oventis. What I'm comparing here in these columns is the June 2021 quarter, when we really had just some online advertising and a website, but no digital journey, no customer relationship management platform in place. So we're just advertising online and bringing patients to a website. The second column is the September 2021 quarter, where we were able to use a beta version of our new digital customer relationship management software in the US, but not yet in Australia or Canada. So you see snapshots of where the funnel was at the end of the June quarter, compared to where we're at the end of the September quarter, just 2 months ago. You can see a dramatic increase in the number of patients who come into the funnel, a doubling of patients landing on the site and seeking information. You can also see a 46% increase in active leads. And for Aventis, an active lead is more than just a name and an email address. An active lead for us is someone who's come to the site, given us their information, answered very important questions about their health, their history with sleep apnea, and what devices or products they've used in the past, and indicated that they want more information. So this database of leads is extremely valuable to our ongoing marketing effort. Once they go through the lead process, they schedule a telehealth consultation where an Aventis representative kind of screens them for care and then decides if the patient meets the criteria for the device, is engaged, ready to go forward, might check insurance, or at this time determine if the patient wants to be cash pay, and then refers that patient into care. So this snapshot shows really excellent growth in all the metrics, but the last one is the one that really matters the most. From quarter over quarter, we showed a 43% increase in the number of patients that had been through that entire new digital customer capture model, been screened, said they want to move forward, and are now in the care side of our program, getting ready for consultations, sleep testing, and device creation. And we'll explain a little bit more about that later. What's really nice about this model is it's all digital. And unlike 10 years ago, we can optimize and manage this funnel on a day-to-day basis. We can see what campaigns work, we can see what the click rates are, we can see how long patients stay on our website, and we can see how much engagement we have. So this gives us a real opportunity to do great work in direct-to-consumer marketing and increase our opportunity as a company. So if we go back to the beginning, when we said our vision in 2024 was that O2 vent should take a place as a first-line therapy for sleep apnea. And we talked about you needed the technology that was superior to the other options, both in patient interest and adoptability, but in predictability and good outcomes. And I think we've got that data now to say that we are that superior treatment technology. The other part of the equation was that expert, empathetic, virtual customer journey. And through a very difficult year with pandemic strikes and a lot of our sites really not having their own referrals, we pivoted to a standard of care that's superior and equivalent to being an in-person model. And we also pivoted to a very digital customer capture model, all in 1 year. At the same time, we kept plowing away at the great value builders for our company in our space, and a company going from that transition from early commercialization to that broad commercial acceptance that we're seeking. We continued to plow into and invest into our patent portfolio, or intellectual property portfolio, continue to manage regulatory approvals and have approvals in US, Europe, Canada, and Australia, managed to secure reimbursement and reimbursement contracts in the US to serve patients in all 50 states. And then, as we've already discussed, a scalable customer capture model that can be scaled without huge human infrastructure costs in a digital platform. That also led us to work on our manufacturing and logistics and really prepare for growth. So how did we do? Last fiscal year ended June 30, 2021. As I mentioned, the headwinds of a respiratory pandemic and a pivot between an in-person model and a virtual model. Yet despite this, even though it was a small base, we doubled our sales and receipts. So it was a really good year in terms of growth under pretty challenging transitions for the team. We innovated our customer capture model. We did that transition to virtual, or pivot to virtual, which is still ongoing. And as I mentioned, one of the key accomplishments for the US market was to sign a partnership with a mixed medical practice that allowed us to be covered, or say we were covered by insurance in all 50 states, and allow those patients to either choose cash pay for the O2 vent therapy for the entire journey, or to choose an insurance option where the insurance might pay all or part of the costs of their therapy. So really our position in a year that was with difficulty to really address a major market need in the United States, Australia, and Canada. What this graph kind of shows is a snapshot and a little bit of the transition. So we have to take care of these patients' needs. That includes all the screening, partnering, and all of that. And as I mentioned, we had a real escalation in our telehealth consultations and in the customer funnel. The yellow bars show a dramatic increase quarter over quarter in the number of patients that have been through the telehealth consult process, that last step before choosing care. And I can say already in this quarter, we've again already exceeded halfway through this quarter, all of last quarter's telehealth consultations. So we really are scaling and growing in the right way. That does come with a catch, however. I mentioned that we'd signed the US national insurance contract, which was a real benefit to patients. That happened in August and September, and all of those patients said, so take the time to check my insurance and make sure that I qualify for insurance reimbursement to offset the costs of the O2 vent therapy. Now, this is seasonal in the United States because in the United States, many patients have deductibles that they start with at the beginning of the year. They have healthcare visits, they use those deductibles, and then they get more and more of their care paid for by the insurance company once that deductible is gone. So almost every patient that we presented the proposition to between August and today has said, please go take me through that insurance model. So as you see, we had growth, we saw the COVID dip, we had growth again, but then we see the deferred revenue. The one challenge with insurance business is that the insurance companies take a long time to pay. So we have a lot of patients that have been screened and referred into care. We have a healthy model, but we have delayed revenues. And that's because of the small base that we were operating on. What I think you'll see is a real stabilization in throughput. And as this volume grows, this will all even out and it'll just be noise. And you'll see good, consistent growth in all of the funnel metrics in the customer capture model, and also unit revenues will follow in next quarter and the following quarter. So what are our goals? What are our milestones that we're seeking in this fiscal year? Well, as we've already explained, we're really excited about our new digital customer capture model. And we really believe that we can make incremental and efficiency gains in every step of that process as we continue to evolve that program and optimize it. We're really tracking conversion rates. So when we bring the patients into telehealth consultation, we are tracking everything we do and say and the effectiveness of our approach and working to optimize that over time. Still, behind the scenes, building more clinical evidence, intellectual property, operational efficiency, and of course, the real goal of the company over time is to demonstrate with all the work we've done and the transition that we have a clear path to break even. And that's what we'll be proud to start talking about in the coming quarters. Before I wrap up, I'd like to remind us all of why we're here. I've worked in med tech for a long time, and one of the greatest things about working for a company like Oventis is not just all of the really neat business dynamics and the opportunities that we have, but it's really taking care of patients. If we do our job the way we're supposed to, we really impact human lives. And one of the greatest things about being in Oventis is almost on a daily basis, we touch a patient's life who comes back to us and says how grateful they are that they met us, that they found us, and that they were into O2 vent care. And this is really, I think, one of the proudest parts of being at Oventis. Well, with that being said, I think that's the end of my presentation, and I welcome any questions.
Thanks so much, John. It's awesome to hear that your product is changing the quality of life for so many people around the world. I'd love to hand over to everyone else in the room who might want to ask some questions. Please feel free to put them in the Q&A panel. John, while people are doing that, I'd love to ask one myself.
Please go ahead. What
sort of impact do you think that the FDA approval of the valve will have on sales and adoption of the device?
Well, I think that's a fantastic question. So your question is the X-Vent accessory, which we mentioned earlier, which is available in Australia and Canada. How will it drive incremental benefit in the US market? Well, the answer is, I think there are so many patients for care, and we call that low-hanging fruit, without the X-Vent accessory that I think we can really scale our growth without it. But I can tell you, the X-Vent really does become an important part of releasing that predictive algorithm that we talked about earlier. So we're going to pilot how to use the predictive algorithm in Australia because we have all the devices approved in market. And that translates into what we will do in the United States to follow. And I think the X-Vent is going to be a really important tool, not just really for the patient, but more for the sleep doctor and the sleep clinician. So that's going to change our marketing when it's available.
Awesome. I've got another one from someone in the chat. From a competitive standpoint, what Oventis is doing with its direct-to-consumer offering unique?
It is. So in order to really characterize how patients find out about care, we did in-depth analysis of all of the players in the space that were of any market share of note anywhere in the 3 markets where we focus, US, Canada, and Australia. And we did a map on not only what the technology offered, that's whether it's a CPAP-like device or an oral appliance-like device, but we also went through their journeys and tried to determine how are they communicating with patients, what's the language they're using, and what's their value proposition. We are the only company that's really directly marketing to patients to generate demand in language that's directed at patients. And what I mean by that, almost all the competitors in this space, even though their device might have some efficacy, they're marketing really in clinical language to the clinician. And I really think that that's long-term a mistake. I think the opportunity in this marketplace is to inspire patients directly and then manage that journey for them so they can get access to world-class clinicians and they don't have to stumble through that journey themselves. So we are unique. I think in marketing, we call that high ground. And I think as the first product of its type and with the results we have, we are the only one really marketing to patients directly in patient language so that they're really inspired to come into care.
Yeah, John, a little bit more on that. Is there a way that the company thinks that it can increase its conversion of the large number of leads that it's getting into sales?
Yes, absolutely. So everything you try is new. It takes some time to really get good at it. And so we have a really expert person in Chris Hart, Dr. Hart, in really understanding all of the clinical needs, but we really hadn't focused on or had a lot of experience in that digital part, that part from digital journey to telehealth consultation. So I think that we'll get better quarter on quarter, and those are all over the place this quarter. That's why we're really not talking about it yet. In the coming quarters, you'll be seeing those funnel metrics, conversion metrics, and then some of the other metrics going forward. So I think we have some work to do, but I do think we're really getting good at it.
Awesome. John, probably time for one more. Are you happy with the turnaround? And is there any other avenues the company can look at to expand acceptance in the short term?
Well, we think about nothing but, obviously the pandemic set the company back a bit and made us stronger by developing these models. But we think about nothing more than how can we find a better model, faster model. We say a friction-free model where we can take care of more patients. So yes, the number one project in the company right now is not how to find patients, because I think we've proven that very quickly that we can find these patients and bring in. Our real project for patient flow is to make sure that once we get them, we convert them, and then we really provide a very smooth patient journey from beginning to end. And that's in process.
Beautiful. John, thank you so much for your time today. Can't wait to continue watching the Aventus story.
It was a great pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity, and everyone have a great day.